hormonal balance, gut optimization, cellular detoxification, and sugar metabolism. All these are completely ignored by the traditional route.
We have started looking at, regenerative therapies like exosomes and stem cells for some of our clients to really start looking at how do we, really look to the future of where medicine needs to go, which is how do we really sort of address damage or tissue injury and mitochondrial efficiency, as you're mentioning, at a much earlier pace with some of these newer technologies that are available.
It's wonderful to see that the anti-aging medicine or functional medicine is going to lead the way to this new way of doing medicine. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Joy Kong podcast. So here's where I have the pleasure of sharing with you some of the newest ideas and some of the pioneers in the health and wellness industry, where really together we can propel this wave forward, that we can stall the aging process, even reverse the aging process, and thus prevent diseases and help people to live longer, live better, just live a more vibrant life. So today I'm inviting another pioneer, Dr. Carlos Jorge. Dr. Jorge, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to see you, Joy.
Yeah, so I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Carlos. So he is a co-founder of Companion Health, which is an innovative private membership, longevity, functional medicine, and primary care center in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's also the chief medical officer of Healthcoin Exchange, which is a disruptive technology solutions company that is developing platforms to offer alternative payments, engagements, and clinician interactions for consumers. Dr. Jorge is triple board certified in family medicine, functional and regenerative medicine, and clinical lipidology. Dr. Jorge is the former medical director of Presbyterian Novant Heart and Wellness and Corporate Medicine located in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's an active member of various groups and boards, including A4M, which is American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and MMI, and various organizations. And he's originally from the Dominican Republic, where he attended medical school and graduated cum laude. He completed his residency in 2002 in Northwestern University. Dr. Carlos, I know you are doing some really interesting things in your clinic, and you have your own understanding and approaches to the whole anti-aging field. So maybe you can share a little bit of what you see as some of the bigger challenges for the whole anti-aging effort. What is dragging us back the most severely?
Thank you again for having me. And I appreciate all your insight. You've been helpful as I've looked at some of the other regenerative therapies. So I appreciate that as well. I think right off the bat, the biggest challenge we have is often just how we define aging, right? So we often talk about our chronological age, which is how many years we've kind of been on the earth, let's say. And then some people talk about biological aging. And that's also, getting a lot of attention recently, which is if I'm, let's say, 40, do I really reflect that biologically and physiologically, or am I perhaps, a decade older? And then there's some newer concepts that I'm sure, maybe some folks have heard of, which we talk about also, which, for example, inflammaging, right? So the concept that as we progress through time, we have this sort of low-grade chronic inflammation that's also now accelerating our aging process. So I think definitions are part of the kind of the challenge. So we often, with our clients, talk about those things, like this is how old you are, but then we really want to start trying to understand biologically, what does that look like? And the other piece, too, is even psychologically, right? We talk about psychological aging because as we get older, and as we increase our longevity, what's happening to the peers, the community around us? Are they keeping up with us or not? And, I'll give you a personal story. My grandfather lived to be 99, was very vibrant for a long time, but really by the end of his life, did not have a lot of his peers around him. So it's an interesting thing and an interesting dynamic when we talk about aging. And then the other piece in the United States, especially, and I think people know this, we start talking now about what is our lifespan versus our health span, right? So how long we are alive versus how long we're alive in really good health. And in the United States, there's a big gap there. So if we live on average till about 73, let's say, we spend almost 9 years of our life in less than stellar health. And so this also influences aging. And so for us, we really want to have frank conversations with our clients to talk about, and I like how you said it, is kind of like, how do we optimize your aging for a life that's full of vitality, grace, energy, et cetera. So that's for us the biggest driver when we talk about aging.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You're talking about this psychological aging. That's not talked about very much. I'm sure that plays a huge part into the physical aging.
It does. And it's interesting because one of the things that we talk about, all of us talk about, especially when we talk about primary care, we know cardiovascular disease and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. These are all things that are associated with aging as a general rule. That's the common cofactor for a lot of these things is as we get older, we tend to potentially have some of these illnesses. One of the things that has been really interesting that I've really just kind of started to get real passionate about is the concept of loneliness in aging, right? So the whole idea of psychosocial dynamics that influence aging. So loneliness as a cofactor or as a chronic disease and how that then influences both cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative diseases, and just accelerates our aging process when we don't have community around us. And so that's also a big factor in why I think psychosocial aging is going to get some more attention, especially over the next, I think, couple of years or so.
Yeah, there may be some very interesting studies coming out correlating psychology and loneliness and aging process. I'd be very interested. As you know, I was a psychiatrist for 11 years, so always very interested in the psychological aspect. So how are you approaching things in your clinic? So I know you have this membership model in your clinic. How do you, when people come in, how do you approach this aging and vitality aspect?
Yeah, so we really, not to sound sort of basic, but we try to meet first people where they are, right? So when folks come into our practice, we usually spend about 2 hours in that first visit to try to understand, what are they searching for? Are they a health optimizer, a biohacker, or are they just somebody who's needing some real guidance and has been to several different places and just hasn't gotten, let's say, the answers they need, or they don't feel they're on that path that they really want to be on. And so as we identify those things, we always weave in, well, so what do you see for yourself in the next 5, 10, 20, 30? And I ask that question even of people who are in their 60s, and I've got a couple of folks who are in their 70s. Like, what does that look like for you over the next 10 to 20 years? Because if we take the typical example in the United States, most grandparents cross a threshold where perhaps they can't get on the ground, and to play with their grandkids and those types of things. So a lot of it is about what do they want to accomplish. And, I look at like Dr. Peter Attia, he talks a lot about that, like kind of his centenarian decathlon. And so, we weave some of that in as we're talking to our clients about what they want to accomplish. And then we really sort of identify, we start talking about aging, and I really talk a lot about inflammation and how all the variables that drive inflammation, right? So the big ones that we know are stress, our connections, our lack of sleep, lack of exercise, what we put into our system, foods, chemicals, et cetera, all those things that drive inflammation and aging, we really start to identify and start talking about. And then, we really get into the weeds when we start looking at the risk factors for, high level cardiovascular disease, for example. We're doing the advanced cardiovascular panels, trying to identify things earlier for people so that as we identify those things, we can start really reversing and working on, turning that process down, if you will. So a lot of it is focused, and I write out things for our clients where the word inflammation takes sort of center stage for a lot of what we do, and how that then is driving a lot of the different aging components that we have.
Yeah, the aging theory, people talk about, of course, cellular senescence, and mitochondria decline, and genetic changes. Is your clinic engaging in things like NAD therapy and other forms of therapies that may be able to help with mitochondria, or even cellular rejuvenation? Like how would you approach? I just asked you a bunch of questions at once.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, so short answer is yes, all of the above. We are engaged in a lot of these things. And so with, as our clients come in, we have a roadmap that we're working with. So we want to understand, obviously, their hormones. We want to understand their basic chemistries, their sugars, et cetera, gut health, and how they're processing everything that they're being exposed to. Like, we want to get the basics and the baselines down. Once we've done that, then we can start saying, okay, how do we now optimize some of the metabolic pathways, right? So are you methylating correctly? Are you have the necessary cofactors? You mentioned NAD, for example, right? So are there ways to deliver, NAD through capsule or precursors like the NRs and nicotinamide ribose and those types of things? We do NAD drips here in the office for our clients. We do other sort of other anti-inflammatory drips as well, and immune boosting drips to help our clients kind of really start optimizing all these pathways. And then, as you're familiar and with your guidance as well, we have started looking at, regenerative therapies like exosomes and stem cells for some of our clients to really start, looking at how do we, really, really look to the future of where medicine needs to go, which is, how do we really sort of address damage or tissue injury and mitochondrial efficiency, as you're mentioning, at a much earlier pace with some of these newer technologies that are available. Interestingly too, we have a subpopulation of some long COVID cases here, and so we've started looking at mitochondrial efficiency and some of that with COVID as well, and how do you boost thyroid function for mitochondrial efficiency? How do you use other supplements that may be out there for mitochondrial efficiency? Other inflammatory pathways, we use, other molecules like nitric oxide and glutathione and sulforaphane. I mean, so we really try to weave in a lot of these, these supplements and other sort of tools that are available to us that most people perhaps just aren't familiar with in the general population.
So how's your success rate when it comes to long COVID?
Well, knock on wood, right now we're doing well. So, but I mean, we have about a dozen folks that we're working with, and so again, the way I approach it is thinking of COVID as something that dysregulated your immune system, and the end result is a massive inflammatory response, right? So what we term at the, when we took our sort of training through the A4M, they talk about a chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And there are multiple triggers for that. Lyme can be one, Epstein-Barr, mold toxicity, heavy metals, et cetera. And now sort of I look at it as well as is COVID perhaps one of these that is going to trigger kind of this chronic inflammatory response? And then how do we sort of start working to, again, bit by bit, start decreasing these inflammatory pathways through, again, we maximize the basic things first. Like, how are you sleeping? We have younger people who are late high school, early college. Like, how do you get a college student to maximize sleep, let's say, right? It's something that most of us, when we were in college, kind of didn't do very well, right? And so it's really looking at all those basic things first, stress modulation and cortisol and nutrition and all those things. And then once we've done that, then we start saying, okay, same thing. Let's look at some of these metabolic pathways. We also use some alternative therapies like low-dose naltrexone and other things that are available. And then the other interesting thing, which I think, again, I'd probably pick your brain on at some point more and more, is how to utilize things like exosome therapy for long COVID, for example, because of the benefit that exosomes have, especially for an inflammatory cascades. So it's something that we're looking at with a couple of our cases right now to see how do we weave that in as part of the therapeutic kind of window for these folks.
I have a protocol I can share with you.
Appreciate that.
It's almost like for most diseases, if you are looking at an anti-aging approach, it's very similar for basically helping with any condition. I think that's the broad range of this approach to health that's lacking in traditional medicine. This range that you mentioned about hormonal balance, gut optimization, maybe cellular detoxification and sugar metabolism, all these are completely ignored by I don't know how many specialties we have in medicine, but almost completely ignored by all the traditional route. All the traditional fields. So that's a shame, and I'm sure that's going to change. And it's wonderful to see that the anti-aging medicine or functional medicine is going to lead the way to this new way of doing medicine. And it's just going to become mainstream. It's just funny now. Well, actually, 20 years ago, it was called alternative medicine, and It's no longer called that, right? Now we just call it holistic medicine, integrated medicine. So it's already changing. One day it's just going to be medicine. This is how we do medicine.
I 100% agree. Like I say the same thing to all our clients and all our staff when we bring folks on. Like this is how we should be thinking about medicine. This real very aggressive, proactive thought process of, no longer driving and treating just disease, but really understanding like, how did we get there? And it's for me, it was transformative from like where I was, let's say 4.5, 5 years ago when, I was in a different kind of setting of insurance-based kind of cranking medicine. I was just like, this is not a sustainable model of how we're taking care of people.
You said that was only 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, so I did my board certification in 2016, but I didn't start our new center until about right before COVID, actually. And happened, COVID, interestingly, it was a tough time, obviously, as we all know, but it helped us really sort of formulate how we wanted to approach things. And really for me, it just has been a wonderful thing to be involved in again, because I was trying to build functional, integrative anti-aging processes within a traditional model. And it just was very, very difficult to do. And I tried to do that for almost 3 years.
I see. So you were educated traditionally, like all of us are, that have MD or DO behind our names. But how did you make this transition? Because everyone has a story. Why didn't you stick in your lane of how you were educated?
So it's a good question. I would say first and foremost, the journey would be from like our firstborn had what was called cyclic vomiting syndrome. Now 22, doing really well in college and thriving. But we went to a lot of specialists and spent a lot of time, and no one ever talked to us about nutrition. No one ever talked to us about, hey, it could be food, it could be chemicals in the food, it could be the colorings in the food, it could be preservatives in the food. And it really took myself and my wife to do some digging and some investigation. And we were like, oh my gosh, like every time we travel and we stop here and eat this, within a couple hours, there's this massive event of migraines and vomiting and all these other things. So I think once you start peeling back the layers of understanding how everything around us is actually influencing our health, that really started driving me to explore it and start looking at, furthering my education in lots of ways. I initially started with a very, I'd say again, traditional approach of looking at lipidology and how do you get more aggressive with cardiovascular disease prevention and those things. And then I just took a functional medicine class. All kidding aside, I needed continuing medical education. I was like running around like, oh, let me just do this class. And it was just an eye-opening experience. I was like, oh my gosh, like, why are we not doing this? And from then on in 2012, I did all the certifications and fellowship work that I think you've done as well, and then did the board exam at that time. So as I tried to sort of build this into a traditional insurance-based world, it just was like the insurance world was not interested in helping kind of pay for these things and get the help for these patients and clients. And so I left traditional practice in mid 2019. And honestly, I was on the verge of getting out of medicine. That's how disillusioned I was with the whole process.
That would be a shame after all that
Yeah, well,
education.
thank you. So I took about 3 months off and really, did some deep sort of digging and thinking about things. And so between that time and when COVID started, my wife and I, my wife's my business partner, she's got her MBA, has done other businesses. We really then conceptually thought about what we wanted to create, right? And we had some advice from other colleagues here in Charlotte, who basically said, look, you just have to create it outside the traditional model. And once you do that, establish what you want to sort of really focus on, you will get to kind of where you are. And, so far it's been a really both kind of satisfying professionally and just a different kind of great experience that we're having, helping people on a one-to-one basis in a lot of ways. And, our ultimate goal is to be able to take this type of model and replicate it at larger scale. Like, it's something that can be done. We just have to keep, as you said, I think earlier, it's like the momentum and the change for this has to continue, with all of us kind of driving this to the way medicine should be for all of us.
Yeah, it sounds like your clinic's doing well. So there must be a tremendous need for this because the insurance is not covering it. So
Right.
People are willing to pay out of pocket for
Right.
what you have to offer.
We really care about what we do. We started with 2 of us. We now have about 18 people who are part of our clinic. Some are part-time, some are full-time. All of our part-time are all our coaches. And I think we had talked before we came on. We build into all of our processes integrative coaches. And so every client that walks into our office gets a coach that's sort of, it's their right hand. And so if we talk about, how do you improve adding vegetables? How do you reduce your gluten? How do you change dairy to a nut milk? We help all our clients with that. And so not only do we do nutrition, but we also talk to them about stress and meditation and breath work and spirituality. It's all about how do we heal, which allows us to kind of going back to the original, how do we reduce stress and improve sleep? Because that's all going to help how we age, right? So we know that if we work on all those variables, we're going to decrease inflammation, you're going to age better, you're going to feel better, more energy, et cetera. And so It's a very comprehensive way that we've approached it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You must be really happy that you did not leave medicine.
I am. No, I couldn't see myself working at a bank or something like that. No, that would not.
Yeah, and then you got into this interesting field that I don't think most people have not heard about it, called clinical lipidology. So,
Right.
How did you even get into that, and what is it?
Right. So clinical lipidology is basically it was a group of a lot of cardiologists, and especially preventive cardiologists, who started looking at cholesterol as sort of a specific line that they wanted to focus on. So back in, it was probably 2007, 2008, I just got interested in approaching kind of a more preventative way of looking at cardiovascular disease. So how do you identify cardiovascular risk factors at a much earlier stage, and then really look at cardiovascular components like especially cholesterol, and cholesterol metabolism in a bigger way, in a much more detailed way. So everyone's fairly familiar with the way we do things, right? So your total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, and HDL, which is our good cholesterol. But the reality is those are just kind of scratching the surface. And so, what really drove interest for me was this whole world of advanced cholesterol tests that you can do through, Cleveland Clinic and Boston Heart Lab and all these other ones, where they really help identify bigger risk markers that we have, both genetic and other sort of markers for inflammation. And so putting all that together, I guess it goes back to what really keeps me in medicine is I love the puzzle of all of it as well. So understanding how all those little risk factors are driving the contribution to potentially more cardiovascular disease. And so that really just started me down, again, another path. And I did a certification in lipidology, but I also got a certification in ultrasound technology for being able to do my own like carotid ultrasounds, like I would do them and do all the measurements and all those things. So really trying to identify early risk factors, better cardiovascular cholesterol markers, inflammatory markers for the like disease in our arteries. And I point here because our carotid is right here. And then also learning, what are easy tests that we can do for our patients and clients to help identify where they are in that, continuum of our artery disease. So doing things like a carotid intima ultrasound, which is just a quick ultrasound of your neck, doing coronary calcium scores, which are a fast CAT scan of the arteries around the heart. All that gives us information. And so it was another passion that I've had, and I've just kind of continued to have it and really immersed it within the functional kind of approach that we do now, right? So we do talk about medications and all those things with our clients. We know all about, the new medicines that are here and available. And yet we really spend a lot of our time with cardiovascular clients talking about the basics, right? The nutrition and maximizing those things, supplements and how to work on those things. So it's all part of, I think, kind of the drive to do things better by the people that we serve, quite frankly.
So the lipidology, it's about how lipids affect our cardiovascular system. That's one aspect, right? And then what to monitor for. I assume that also include the nutritional aspects of the types of lipids and what we should consume. So I think that's just beginning to be aware of the importance of fats and different type of fats, and the prominence of omega-3 and really what that means, omega-3 versus 6. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think people are probably still a little confused. I think just recently it's coming to prominence that the industrial seed oils, that just how horrific it can be for us. And previously, nobody was talking about that. So maybe you can touch upon, that first.
Yeah. So from an omega standpoint, so we do, in essence, measure these in our office. So there's a test that we use, which is called the Omega Index. It's through the Cleveland Heart Lab. And it gives us a nice breakdown of your 3, 6, and all the different sort of derivatives of it and the concentrations and ratios of those. So, the beauty of a lot of what we can do is that we can really, on a detailed level, kind of look at those ratios and understand. So we know that, the more natural wild sources of these oils, the better they're going to be for you, right? So when we talk about omegas, we really say, look, we want you to try to find products or, if you're going to choose to eat, let's say animal products, what are the best source ones, wild caught salmons, and where do you get that from? So that's one component of kind of that nutritional piece that we want to do. From the seed oils and really kind of looking at the different oils and cooking substances, we really try to orient our clients around things like avocado and some olive oils, not always for cooking, always typically for finishing dishes and those types of things. So trying to really work on the exposure of those things. And then we really talk then about sort of the trans fats and some of the other things that in the past we used to have, like the margarines and all these other things that were out there. There was really a nice book that just came out that I think people would enjoy reading. It's called Ultra Processed People. It's by a physician from Oxford in England, and his name is escaping me, but we can certainly find it and get it posted. But he really talks about the whole kind of industry of food and how the oils that have been created over the last 50, 60 years, palm oils and these other sort of coconut oils, the way they're sort of formulated and what that actually does to the organism, which is us, from an inflammatory and disease-driving process. So we really do spend time talking about that as well. The interesting thing about fats is look, we need fats, we need proteins, we need carbohydrates. It's just what types, what amounts, what's the quality, and when are we consuming these things is sort of a very important thing. And so, one thing, especially and as we age, is protein, right? Because as we age, how we assimilate protein, how we build muscle starts to change. And so we need to have better sources, especially of protein. And then we need to really think about, where are we getting those protein sources? So we work with our clients on that as well. And then we talk about what are the healthy fats, what are not healthy fats. And, we go through and we give them options for all those things as well. And then carbohydrates. What are the carbohydrates you should have? What are the ones we want to really try to avoid as much as possible? So, and again, it all orients, and I know I keep repeating the word, but it orients around what drives inflammation is going to drive a faster aging process. And so, that nutritional piece has to be integral to what we're doing.
Yeah. So coming back to the fats, like going to a market like Sprouts that have all these roasted nuts, and then when you look at what they roasted them in, it says canola oil, or any packages, of some supposed to be healthy snacks, and then they will have sunflower oil. I mean, sounds very neutral, right? It sounds harmless. So what do you think of, when they say sunflower oil or safflower oil? What's your response?
We typically tell our clients not to use those and to find other ways of find ones that are not done with those types of oil, canola, sunflower, the palm oil is another one that we try to really sort of have folks avoid, not only for the inflammatory cascade, but there's a whole nother environmental pathway of how we take care of the world we exist in as well is really important to health. But we try to say, look, we can teach you. So we teach clients how to do things as well. So we have a little mini kitchen in our practice. We tell them, we teach them how to make smoothies. We teach them how to use an Instapot to make different things. We can show them how to roast their own sort of nuts at home. If you get, raw almonds and those types of things, like there are very simple ways of doing some of these things and just finishing with little drizzles of a very high quality olive oil or a high quality avocado oil, with some good Himalayan sea salt and those types of things is the way we would prefer. We have to be realistic. And that's where I said we have to meet folks where they are. Like I can't take someone who has never eaten an almond, let's say, and say, oh yeah, you're going to start roasting your own almonds at home, right? It's not going to happen. But, so it's working to understand where they are in that process. And then how do we support them to get them to the point where maybe in a year they are doing some of these things on their own. And so to me, that's kind of the whole component of health. Like, how do we get someone to go from never doing something to teaching somebody else about it in a year from now, let's say. And so, yeah, I think to your original question is we try to avoid those things, but we are also realistic about, I'd rather you eat the almond than eat, a Snickers bar or something like that has almonds, let's say, right? So, it's choosing some of these lesser evil approaches, and then from there, building on top of that. One of our big messages for a lot of our clients is we don't want to go super restrictive. We want to talk about how do you add a lot of the healthier things, right? So how do we add a bunch more vegetables and fiber and healthier fruits for you on top of the things that perhaps you're already doing? And what that does is it starts to crowd out the real negative things that they perhaps are doing. And that's kind of another approach that we take with folks. I
see. And talking about nuts, a lot of people are afraid to eat too many nuts because of the omega-6 content and the concern. Are you concerned about that?
Again, it's a sort of a trade-off. I'm less concerned about it. I think if you're going to eat, let's say, a quarter cup of nuts versus, a bag of chips as a snack, I think this is going to win out as far as the nuts are concerned, right? For the fiber content, the healthier fat content, et cetera. So I think it's all looking at kind of what the long-term effect of all these things are. Do I want to eat something that's been fried in canola oil or palm oil, and it's a potato that was, grown with pesticides, et cetera? Or am I going to eat a quarter cup of nuts that may have a omega-6 that maybe will drive a little bit of inflammation, but has a lot other benefits that would be, healthier in the long run for us. Again, it's that sort of balancing that we have to look at with folks.
Yeah, yeah, well said. So, when it comes to your clinic and what it does for people, my mantra is always, I want to give people the biggest bang for their buck. So what is that's kind of how I want to go through life is, what's the minimum amount of effort we can put in to get the maximum results? So what are some of your favorite therapies or approaches that you think is making the biggest difference for people?
For us, I think, Joy, we designed our practice purposefully to engage our clients more frequently. I think the toughest thing for me that I was seeing in medicine was you would see somebody for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you give a lot of information, perhaps a lot of therapies and medicines and all this other stuff. And then 3-6 months go by, maybe a year goes by, and there's this sort of disappearance into the void. And it just didn't feel right. And quite frankly, I think our biggest thing that we do that drives a lot of real positive results and why we're getting a lot of momentum, and we do no traditional advertising. It's been word of mouth growth for us, which is awesome. Is that we engage with our clients very proactively to the point where we're currently building a technology solution within our practice, both for engagement further with our clients, but also to be able to track on a more detailed level supplements and medications, but in a way that isn't kind of the, hey, what does my electronic MyChart show, but more of kind of a forward-leaning, customer deliverable app for them to be really much more engaged with us. Okay. And so we're doing that internally because we want to continue to have the engagement with our client that will take them to that next level of success. And really success for me is they come out of there and they're like, I feel amazing. I didn't think I would feel this in a year. And that's selfishly, it feels great to hear that from somebody, I think, and we're doing it by really it's not rocket science. We're really just talking to them about where they are, what are the things that we can provide, and where do they see themselves. And then we just help kind of build that framework for them and get them to where they need to be, and that's, to me, just been super, super rewarding over the last now 4 years.
Okay. Do you have some interesting success stories that you want to share? Maybe as a traditionally trained doctor that you would feel like a little powerless, but now you have new tools and then you've seen really interesting results in?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go to our website, we have member of the months each month that we do. And I think the most recent one that is going to be coming out in December is, I'll just say first letter of her name, but A, who basically for the last kind of 3.5 years has sort of was kind of, I would say, kind of going through some motions of moving through, I want to eat a little bit better. I want to work on exercise. I want to work on stress, but really just, it was taking a little bit longer for her to find, I think, her why of what was going to take her to that next level. And over the last few months, we shifted how we talked about exercise. We shifted how we talked about nutrition. And again, we went to, let's not talk about what you're not doing anymore. Let's just talk about how do we add in some of these positive behaviors that you want to have. And let's just set some very tiny, small goals and habits that you're going to do. So the first was, there was a gym, a large new gym that was very close to her home. I need you to just go and tour it and see what it looks like. And if you like it, you need to sign up that day. It happens, right? So she forces that, does that. It's now, she's paying for this. Now there's a stickiness there that's going to happen. So she's engaging with that. And then nutritionally, we talked about other sort of, how do we add things in? So with her coach, she, learned how to make some things at home that were different for her, substituting vegetables, et cetera. And so fast forward, we get an email from her, I don't know, it was probably 3.5 weeks ago, where she said, to let you guys know, I went on a hike with my mom a year and a half ago. I thought I was going to die on that hike. I couldn't get up that mountain. She's like, and I just got back from the same hike and I did it twice in the day, like without breaking a sweat. Okay. It's, so for some people that journey is longer. And for some of the clients that we serve, it's a much faster thing. But what it is like, it's being there to support them and just continue to provide the guidance. And so for me, that's been one of the most kind of just, it's so emotionally sort of stimulating because you realize like, hey, it may take 4 years, it may take 5 years, it may take a week for some people, but if you give them that support and you give them the tools that we have available with all the functional integrated pieces that we have, they get there. Okay. And so she's been dealing with a lot of other things, mold toxicity and chronic fatigue and all these other things. But all the while, we've been kind of giving her the guidance and the support to get her to where she needs. And for me, that's truly the most rewarding thing that I think we do.
Wonderful. So any other words of wisdom you want to share with audience? Because I think my audience is a very motivated group of people, really want longevity, want health, want what the best there is to offer in modern medicine in whatever we're coming up with. Any technology that you're super excited about at this point?
Technology wise, I sometimes I'm kind of an old school person with some of the technology pieces. I think the big thing I say to a lot of our clients is learn how to get things identified earlier, right? So I think from a cardiovascular disease standpoint, there's a lot of things that people can do. Know what your ApoB is, or apolipoprotein B is. Know what your genetics are. Know what your carotids look like and your calcium score look like. These are technologies that are not very expensive and they're ready to go. If you want to go to the next level, there's things like Clearly, which is a CT angiogram that's AI sort of overread, which gives a beautiful detailed analysis of your arteries. That technology is incredible. It's AI driven, company called Clearly out of California. There's other tests that are now being developed also for early identification of Alzheimer's. Precivity's is one, AD, which is for Alzheimer's disease. There's some other markers that we do already for genetics of Alzheimer's that people can start identifying. But I would also say to kind of all of our clients and your clients is that I think engaging more aggressively with your providers in your community and asking these questions. I think, it drives physicians. Like, I think in general, and maybe you would agree, is that I think in general, physicians and providers want to be able to provide everything that we could to, our patients and our clients. I think in the traditional approach, so many people are hindered by that traditional approach that they forgot how to sort of think and conceptually come up with some of these things. So, I think engaging more day to day with our providers is something that I recommend to all of us. And so our clients get our emails, they get our cell phones, they have, contact with us. And if I don't know something, I have great resources. Like you're a great resource now, and we have others, right, where we ask questions and we get the answers that our clients need.
Yeah, so definitely find the right provider to help you. And I can't, this has been a common occurrence. A patient may be dealing with a chronic condition for a long time and wasn't getting much relief. And then they come to, doctors like us, let's say they come to my clinic, got some stem cell therapy, got remarkable results. Yeah. And when they went back to the clinic to see their previous doctor, the doctor's shocked and surprised. But that's where the story ends. They weren't asking, well, how did you do it? Tell me more about it. How can I learn about this new technology? Right. Some simply express, just, maybe astonishment or maybe just a little bit, eyebrow lifting, and that's the end of the story. So unfortunately, we would love to see more doctors with open mind, but that seemed to be, part of our human makeup. Sometimes people are very comfortable living in the bubble that was created. And it takes a certain kind of mentality, certain kind of curiosity, and some kind of courage to actually jump out of that. So I would encourage people to really find doctors with some curiosity and with some courage.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So how can people find you, maybe work with you?
We do have virtual plans. I'm licensed in North Carolina and Florida, and have clients that do have fly in from different places. So our website, I mean, if I can, I'll give it to you. It's
Yes.
companionhealthnc.com. So companionhealthnc.com. And that's the easiest way, just to kind of look at what we do, our services, and then from there, just, happy to have a conversation with anybody that is interested in finding out more.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your curiosity and your courage to step out of the system that you were brought up in, and contribute to the world, and to, not only help your own child, but also bring this to so many people around you. Yeah. So thank you for the good work, and thank you for being on this podcast and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, Joy. I appreciate it, and look forward to continuing our conversations and your guidance with what we're building for stem cells. So thank you.
Yes, that's definitely one crucial piece for this new medicine.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jorge.